What does it take to kill the most protected man in the Middle East? 35 years as supreme leader. Thousands of IRGC guards, underground bunkers, decoy convoys. A regime that survived wars, sanctions, and assassinations. None of it was enough. On February 28, 2026, at 9:40 in the morning, a joint U.S.-Israeli strike hit Khamenei's compound in central Tehran. He was dead before noon. In the next few minutes, you'll understand exactly how it happened, who planned it, what Iran did next, and why this is not just the end of one man. It's the latest swing of a 3,000-year pendulum. This is the story they're still trying to piece together. Hit subscribe. This goes deeper than the headlines. The death of Khamenei was always going to be historic. No one expected it to happen like this, in broad daylight, by missile, while the city went about its normal day. A decapitated leadership. A military under attack across 24 provinces. A nuclear threshold state without its center. But this is bigger than one strike. This is the latest chapter in a cycle that has repeated for 3,000 years. There is something the news coverage keeps missing about February 28, 2026. Every outlet focused on the strike itself, the missiles, the compound, the confirmed death. What almost no one stopped to note is where it happened. Not in a bunker. Not underground. Not in a convoy moving through a tunnel at 3 a.m. It happened in a meeting room in the center of Tehran on a Saturday morning in broad daylight. A man who had survived 35 years of the most dangerous job in the Middle East was killed not because his security failed, but because his own system trapped him. That detail matters, and we'll come back to it. On the morning of February 28, 2026, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, 86 years old, supreme leader since 1989, was attending a high-level strategic meeting inside his central Tehran compound. Outside, the city was beginning its day. 9 million people going about their lives, unaware that somewhere above them, precision-guided munitions were already in descent. Within seconds, the compound was gone. According to reporting by The Guardian and Al Jazeera, Israeli intelligence had built a picture of how Iran's inner circle moved that went far beyond satellite imagery. Operatives had accumulated behavioral intelligence so detailed it included where senior officials sourced their food, which routes they preferred, and which specific locations they considered genuinely secure. The CIA added signals intelligence. Canadian forces from the Combined Aerospace Operations Center of the 1st Canadian Air Division provided additional support, according to retired Major General Dennis Thompson. This was not two countries acting impulsively. It was a coalition that had been watching, mapping, and waiting. When the strike came, it hit with a simultaneity that announced its true purpose. Israeli jets and U.S. assets struck across 24 of Iran's 31 provinces at the same moment. Dead alongside Khamenei, General Abdolrahim Mousavi, IRGC Ground Forces Chief Mohammad Pakpour, Air Force Commander Aziz Nasserzadeh, and Ali Shamkhani, the Defense Council Secretary who, just 24 hours earlier, had told journalists that a nuclear deal was within reach. Khamenei's daughter, son-in-law, grandchild, and daughter-in-law were also killed. His wife died from her injuries on March 2nd. Iranian state media denied everything for hours. But satellite imagery showed the compound reduced to rubble. Trump posted confirmation on Truth Social before dawn. By early March 1st, Iran's own Supreme National Security Council could no longer sustain the fiction. State television confirmed what the world already knew. Now here is what the news coverage still hasn't fully connected. The meeting that got Khamenei killed was almost certainly a meeting about nuclear negotiations. Shamkhani had just declared a deal was close. The gathering of senior leadership on Saturday morning was almost certainly convened to decide Iran's next diplomatic move. In other words, The moment Iran came closest to resolution in decades may be the precise moment that created the intelligence window for the strike. The same opening that might have ended the conflict is what ended the man steering it. That is not a coincidence the analysts are discussing enough. And it sets up everything that follows. Here is the version of events you have heard. The United States and Israel identified a military threat, gathered intelligence over months, waited for the right window, and struck with precision. Clean, defensible, logical. Now here is the version the target list actually tells. When you strike missile depots, you are degrading capability. When you strike naval infrastructure, you are limiting reach. These are military operations with clear tactical logic. The world saw exactly that during the 12-day Iran-Israel War of June 2025. February 28, 2026 was something else entirely. 30 top military and civilian leaders targeted in the opening wave. 7 confirmed killed alongside Khamenei, the Defense Council Secretary, the IRGC Ground Forces Chief, the Air Force Commander, the man overseeing nuclear talks, dead the morning after declaring a deal was close. This was not a strike on Iran's weapons. It was a strike on Iran's nervous system, the human architecture that took 35 years to build around one man. CNN presidential historian Tim Naftali described what occurred without diplomatic ambiguity. This was the first time in modern history that the United States, working openly with Israel, killed the recognized head of a sovereign foreign state, not a militia leader. The sitting supreme leader of a nation of 90 million people in his own capital on a Saturday morning. The planning behind this had been building since June 2025. During the 12-day war, Israel had presented Trump with a plan to kill Khamenei. Trump rejected it, not because he opposed the idea in principle, but because the preparation wasn't there yet. What changed between June 2025 and February 2026 was the depth of behavioral intelligence. Trump offered 2 different explanations for authorizing the strike. Officially, an imminent threat. Personally, in a phone call with ABC News, he called Khamenei one of the most evil people in history and described his killing as justice. Not a security calculation, a moral verdict. That single word, justice, is the tell. Because justice is not a military objective. It is the language of finality, of something that was always going to happen. And here is what connects this moment to something far older than American foreign policy. Every great power that has ever tried to control the Iranian plateau, from Alexander's Macedonians to the Arab Caliphate, to the British Empire, has faced the same fundamental problem. You can kill the leader. You cannot kill the idea. The question that Epic Fury left unanswered is whether destroying the Islamic Republic's leadership destroys the force that created it. History, on this particular plateau, suggests the answer is no. What almost no analyst has said clearly enough is this: Iran's retaliation was not chaos. It was a program running exactly as designed. The Islamic Republic had spent years wargaming the precise scenario that unfolded on February 28th. For each condition, leadership decapitation, communications disrupted, command hierarchy shattered, contingency responses had been pre-positioned, pre-authorized, and pre-delegated to commanders at multiple levels of the IRGC. The system was built to keep firing even if the people at the top were gone. Especially if the people at the top were gone. Within hours of Khamenei's death being confirmed, ballistic missiles and drone swarms struck Tel Aviv. U.S. military installations in Bahrain took direct hits. The American consulate in Dubai was targeted. Explosions rocked Doha and Manama. Not the improvised response of a panicked system, the activated response of a system that had prepared for exactly this. The Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, carrying roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply, moved immediately to the center of the crisis. Iranian commanders warned it would be sealed if strikes continued. Oil markets responded within hours. Prices climbed sharply, triggering emergency economic assessments from Washington to Tokyo. Iran's ability to hurt the global economy did not depend on Khamenei being alive. And then Hezbollah moved. From southern Lebanon, holding an estimated 130,000 to 150,000 rockets, accumulated over 4 decades of Iranian investment, it began striking northern Israel with a ferocity that made the 2024 ceasefire definitively irrelevant. For Hezbollah, the supreme leader's death was a theological event. To stay silent would have been to signal that the ideology itself had died with him. Here is what most coverage missed. What Iran built over 35 years was not a conventional military hierarchy dependent on one man at the top. It was a distributed network of ideological commitment and pre-delegated authority specifically designed to survive the loss of its center. Empires have tried to break this structure before. Alexander did it. The Arabs did it. The Mongols did it. Each time, the structures of Persian civilization reconstituted themselves within a generation. What the U.S. and Israel struck on February 28th was the top of a very deep structure. How deep that structure goes is the question that will define the next decade. To understand why the power vacuum in Tehran is not simply a political crisis, you have to understand something about Iranian civilization that most Western analysts underweight. Iran-Persia is one of the oldest continuous civilizations on Earth. When Alexander conquered the Achaemenid Empire in 330 BCE, he didn't replace the Persian administrative structure. He adopted it because nothing he brought from Macedonia was sophisticated enough to govern a territory that large. When the Arab Caliphate swept through in the 7th century CE, the Persian bureaucratic class converted, kept their administrative roles, and within 2 generations had domesticated the new religion into something distinctly Persian. The Safavid dynasty in the 16th century made Shia Islam the state religion, not because Arabia told them to, but because it became the vehicle through which Persian identity reasserted itself against Ottoman dominance. The point is not that Iran is unconquerable. It has been conquered repeatedly. The point is that Iranian civilization has a structural capacity for institutional continuity, for reconstituting itself beneath and around whatever external power claims to be in charge, that has outlasted every empire that ever tried to permanently redirect it. Now look at the vacuum through that lens. Iran's Article 111 stipulates a 3-person council assumes temporary authority while the Assembly of Experts selects a permanent supreme leader. The interim council announced at Khamenei's funeral, Alireza Arafi, President Masoud Pezeshkian, and Chief Justice Ghulam Hossein Mohseni AJ, legitimate on paper, powerless in practice. Because Khamenei had built personal control over every branch of the Iranian state not through formal mechanisms alone, but through relationship networks and accumulated authority that cannot be transferred by announcement. The IRGC was insistent on identifying a permanent supreme leader immediately. According to Axios, the theological stakes were existential. Without a supreme jurist, the Islamic Republic's entire claim to legitimate governance begins to dissolve at its ideological foundation. Several potential successors had been killed in the strikes. Shamkhani was dead. Ali Larijani, the most senior surviving figure, lacked the clerical rank the Constitution requires. Exiled opposition leader Reza Pahlavi called for Iranians to take to the streets. Trump echoed him in an overnight video. But here is what Western commentary keeps missing. Iranians have heard this before. In 1953, the CIA organized the coup that overthrew Prime Minister Mossadegh and reinstalled the Shah. The result was 25 years of American-backed authoritarianism that ultimately produced the very revolution that created the Islamic Republic. The road from regime change to stable democracy on the Iranian plateau has never been short, and it has never been straight. There is a thing that happens after a historical threshold is crossed that never gets enough attention in the immediate coverage. Everyone focuses on what happened. Almost no one focuses on what just became possible. Since the Church Committee investigations of the 1970s, which exposed and condemned CIA attempts to assassinate foreign leaders, including at least 8 documented attempts on Castro, the United States had maintained a formal legal prohibition on foreign leadership killings. Kennedy himself had articulated the logic: we cannot get into that kind of thing, or we would all be targets. Trump crossed that line openly, publicly, and without apology. Not covertly, openly. He announced it on social media. He called it justice. And CNN noted a pattern. Within 2 months, the U.S. had effectively removed the leadership of 2 foreign governments, both adversaries, both controlling significant oil reserves. Maduro was in New York awaiting trial. Khamenei was dead. In Moscow, Beijing, Pyongyang, and every capital that positions itself as a U.S. adversary, the same calculation was now being run. If this is acceptable, what protects us? And the corollary: if this is acceptable for Washington, under what logic is it prohibited for anyone else? This is the connection that runs deepest through 3,000 years of Persian history. The Iranian plateau has always been the place where empires test their most ambitious strategies, and where those strategies produce consequences that reshape the rules for everyone. What happens on this particular plateau tends not to stay on this plateau. History has a name for moments like this. Not wars that begin with a formal declaration, but moments where a single event releases pressures that had been building for years, in directions no one fully anticipated, at a speed that outpaces every diplomatic mechanism designed to contain them. Oil prices surged as Hormuz closure became credible. Hezbollah re-engaged from Lebanon. Putin called Khamenei's killing a cynical murder, violating all standards of international law. China condemned the strikes. Pakistan saw crowds storm the U.S. consulate in Karachi. Thousands gathered outside the Israeli consulate in Istanbul. Israeli strikes killed at least 201 people across 24 provinces. The single most devastating incident: 108 killed at the Shahjarah Tayyeba Girls Elementary School in Minab, 2 more at a school east of Tehran. Abstract military logic becomes concrete when it enters an elementary school. And yet inside Iran, open celebrations were reported in Tehran, Karaj, and Isfahan. Iranians, who had watched thousands of fellow citizens killed during the 2019 and 2022 uprisings, stepping cautiously into something that felt, for the first time in a long time, like a different kind of possibility. This is the fracture Persian history knows well. Every major transition on this plateau has been marked by this same split. Those who mourn the passing of the existing order, and those who saw in the chaos a door that had finally opened. The question was never whether the door would open. The question was always what walked through it. The last time a foreign power removed the Iranian government in 1953, what emerged 25 years later was the Islamic Republic itself. The history of this land does not move in straight lines. But it does move. It always has. History does not always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives at 9:40 in the morning in a city going about its ordinary day, and in the space of seconds, something that took 35 years to build is gone. What happened on February 28, 2026 is still unfolding. The missiles are still flying. The succession crisis remains unresolved. The global economy is absorbing the shockwaves. We are inside one of the most consequential geopolitical ruptures of the 21st century, and we are nowhere near its end. Researchers are studying the consequences. Legal scholars are debating the precedents. Analysts remain divided on what comes next. Our understanding of where this leads is still being written, in real time on the ground, by people whose names we don't yet know. But here is the question that will outlast all the missiles and all the politics. The real question is not whether the Islamic Republic will survive. Institutions can be rebuilt, renamed, or replaced. The real question is what kind of Persia will rise from these ashes. A Persia that has outlasted Alexander, the Arabs, the Ottomans, the British, the Shah, and now the man who ruled for 35 years. Because the story of Iran is far older than any regime. And that story is still being written.